chapter 1. It took us forever to get through it. This one will not be as detailed, for sure. We will not see that through this study as much anymore. I'm a fan of going really in-depth in these studies. And I forgot teenagers don't care. So we're going to make it a little bit more applicable like last time. Last Mary John was really great and was well received in my opinion. But before we start, we are going to dive into prayer. So if you bow your heads with me, we'll jump right into it. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for the privilege that I get to come and share the message, Lord. Good news that you've given to my heart and to so many of my friends' hearts, Lord. So to my heart and to so many of my friends' hearts, Lord. So I just pray that you would allow all of our hearts to be opened, whatever it is you have to say through this passage, Lord, and that you would allow you to love things to your Son's name. So similarly to last time I taught in John, I spent forever studying until the last hour, maybe the last 2 hours before you guys show up, and God gives me something completely different. And I was stoked. I was really excited, but I'm a little nervous. So we're just gonna dive into it. I basically threw away all my notes because I was like, I had like this long list of stuff I'm gonna share with you guys, and I was like, no. So we're gonna read in sections. We're gonna break it into 3 sections, and we're gonna look at our relationship with Jesus. Last time we looked at different ways to share the gospel, different ways to share what a relationship kind of looks like, based off a wedding in Cana. This is Jesus' first miracle. So we're gonna break it up. We're going to read the first 5 verses, and we're going to talk about it. You guys will read along or just listen. This is in the NLT translation, so it's really simple. The next day, Jesus' mother was a guest at the wedding celebration in the village of Cana in Galilee. Jesus and his disciples were also invited to the celebration. The wine supply ran out during the festivities, so Jesus' mother spoke about the problem. They have no more wine, she told them. How does that concern you and I? Jesus asked. My time is not yet come. But his mother told the servants, do whatever he tells you. There's a couple things to point out. Just like there's some fun stuff came to this wedding. And based off Mary's concern, there is a lot of people that believe the fact that his disciples came. A lot of people theorize that it's John. So John, the author, we talk about it all the time. He doesn't ever say his name. He doesn't ever acknowledge himself. The fact that he's writing about this wedding, a lot of people believe that. The thing that's important to know is that there's some crazy things in both weddings. So back in the time of Jesus, there was those that practiced polygamy, where they would marry multiple women, and there was those people, but there's a lot of people that stuck to these ceremonies that was hold to heart. And weddings back then would go on from 5 to 7 days, and there'd be large festivals. And back then, in this Jewish culture, family was the most important thing. You would think, that's what they thought. They were family is so important to us. So important to us that it almost has value. And when people would be married, you wouldn't get to choose who you're married to. It was an arrangement. It was made by your father. It was made by your parents. And it would almost trade you off. Dad uses an example a lot of 2 dudes fishing. He's like, why not give me free, my daughter for your son? Literally, it was like a trade, and it had value. And it meant colliding 2 families, and it was a big deal because they took a lot of pride in their family. They took a lot of pride in their sons and their daughters and carrying them out. Generally, when people would be married, it was estimated that sons would be 16 to 18, but daughters were 13 to 15. I know in our culture that's really weird to look at, but it was really common back then. In fact, Mary was believed to be 14 when she had Jesus. When you would run out of wine represented joy. When you would run out of wine at a festivity or something like that, they would be concerned as to where your marriage was going to go. They would be like, oh man, they are not going to have any joy in their marriage. It's not going to last long. They don't even care about these people coming to the wedding. How are they going to care about their marriage? And they would shun them from the community. If you had a wedding where you didn't take care of the people involved, you would be an outcast. They hate them. It's so weird. I don't get it at all. But what we're looking at this right now is how we speak and listen to God. Mary, this is the last recorded words of her ever. There's very few words that are recorded of Mary, but they're very important. also get to see where she falls here. Mary comes to Jesus and she's coming to him. She's like, dude, we're out of wine. Which also, because she's so concerned, generally the aunt of the groomsman is the one that's in charge of the wedding, which would insinuate this is actually John again, considering that John is the half-brother of Jesus, and anyway, he's in charge. I think it's John's wedding, but we have no way to prove it. She's concerned. And generally you would think, oh wow, that's great. She's concerned for this family that she doesn't want to be shunned. She's concerned that like, hey, Jesus, like it would be great if you could get some wine so like the family isn't shunned from the village. And generally these weddings, the whole village would come. Like there's a lot of pressure. But Jesus replies, because he knows Mary's heart. He says, what does this have to do with me? Some of your guys' translations will say woman. He says, woman, what are you trying to do with me? And in our language, in our English language, that's weird, cool. It's so weird. Yeah. It's hard for us to like vision that. That's so weird. Show everybody.
Yeah, that is weird.
That's so gross. Wow, that's cool.
I have seen it.
It's okay. There you go. Yeah. Anyway, and she came and she was like, yo, like, they ran out and I'm concerned about these people. And Jesus, he replied, woman. And in some translations, like, it's actually easy to be like, he's discriminating against this chick. He's like flat out called her a woman. In, like, I don't know, in this time, in Jewish culture, to call somebody a woman was actually a sign of respect because of how low women were used in Jewish culture and how they were viewed. And they had jobs, and they're like, okay, this is what your whole life is going to be. You're going to get married, you're going to provide for this family in a way that is just like completely discriminatory of you and like using you as a tool, essentially. By recognizing the woman, he not only respected, he also separated himself from being her son. This is when we see Jesus, his first miracle. This is when we see him separate himself impositionally with Mary. Mary is no longer the one that's in charge in this mother-son relationship with Jesus. He's saying, hey, it's kind of weird, but like I'm calling the shots. Like I'm Messiah. This is when this is going to happen, and I'm separating myself from you. In fact, later in John, we will see Mary, by the way, didn't believe until he was resurrected. Spent his whole life with Jesus. He died and resurrected. That's when they believed. In fact, before whenever he was trying to kill him, Mary and her sons, Jesus' brothers, were like, dude, you gotta come with us, like they're gonna kill you. And he was like, they're like, I'm your mother, I'm your son. And he was like, or her brother, and he was like, dude, who's my mom? Who is my brother? Those that are in a relationship, they weren't even in a relationship with him, and he almost disassociated himself with them. In that simple statement, he said this. He also said, you and I, because he knew that Mary wasn't asking because she cared about this. Maybe that was a small reason. Maybe it was. But if you think about it, 14, up until this point in Jesus' life, nobody believed her that Jesus was like, came through God. Like, like just stop making these excuses, bro. Like, this baby popped out before Joe was around. Like, come on, man, what's up with it? Like, they didn't believe her. God, if you can imagine being, well, they believe she's a pop. She's not really. Anyway, reel it back in. If you, Mary had a life from ever since she was 14, which is like some of your guys' age, just becoming an adult, to your whole life just being discriminated against, people not believing you. It says that we read earlier that they couldn't even recognize Jesus until like this Holy Spirit came onto him in the sign of a dove. He didn't stand out. He didn't do anything crazy. Nobody believes him. As far as what's recorded, nobody believes him. She came to Jesus asking, dude, this is a big event. That's referring to the resurrection. That's referring to his death. Well, why would he reply to that if she just said, he's replying to that because she wants him to do something big that people will talk about, and people will be like, wow, Mary's not a hoe. Her son actually is the Messiah. She wanted that validation to not be persecuted against him, which is understandable, but the thing is, I mean, the time when people are going to see him as the Messiah was not this time. And this section's called, this little part 1 through 5, it's called Speak and Listen. One of the things that we are called to do in relationship to God is to bring things to God, like Mary did. To bring things to Jesus. To bring not just the situations that we're in that are hard, not just like the hard times we're in, but what we did ourselves. Because I don't know about you guys, but most situations I'm in, I put myself in. It's a stupid situation. I put myself with something that I did. every once in a while, somebody else is but you, because Jesus rebuked his mother because her heart wasn't where it needed to be. This last part, when she says, like, Mary told her servants to do what Jesus said, that was the best of Jesus. Because she was rebuked. She was told basically, like, hey, this is not for you. And she said, like, Jesus is in control. Servants do exactly what he tells you to. That's how we're supposed to respond. It's not as if we're to tell somebody else to follow him, but that we're supposed to respond with faith. And be like, hey, God, this is what's going on. Tell me what I can do. And that's hard. Talking to God, and receiving it back, sometimes people think it's like, some people, there's tons of ways that people receive when they're talking, when they're spoken back to by Jesus. The number one way, obviously, is like the dumb saying that, and it's not dumb, but I guess it's overused, like, what would Jesus do? Like, we have a whole book of tons of situations that Jesus was in, or his disciples were in, or people were in hard times to figure out what we can do nowadays. I do believe that Jesus can speak to us through feelings and thoughts, and I definitely believe that. I've seen that in my life. But I want you to be weary, because unless you know that Jesus in the Bible, you will not know what his voice sounds like when he is telling you those things. When we ask God X, Y, and Z, we're expecting a response. We have to know what his voice sounds like. We need to know what he's like to be able to do that. And we can't. I bring it to leaders as well. The thing is, though, it's your walk, and it's personal, and it's good. It's good to have that support system. But you need to see what Jesus is telling you. And Mary, she responded faithfully, and she was not control the situation. Like, this is Jesus now. Like, I realized, what happened. This is Jesus, and guys do what he says. And that's what happened. The servants were willing and receptive to what Jesus had to say to do that. Sometimes we don't know what we're getting ourselves into. Sometimes we're just called to follow. We're going to read the next part, which is verses 1 through 8, which is real long. It's called Follow. You guys read with me real quick. 6 stone water pots were standing there. They were used for Jewish ceremonial purposes and held 20 to 30 gallons each. Jesus told the servant, fill the jars with water. When the jars had been filled to the brim, he said, drip some out and take it to the master of ceremonies. So they followed his instructions. So we would speak, talk to God, we would listen. This is one of the hardest things. This is the hardest things in the Bible. This is the hard thing to do, is actually do what he tells you to do. Another way that God speaks to us is through conviction. It's like when we know God put the word of God in our heart, we know what is right, is wrong. We have a conscience to tell what is right, what is wrong, what is against God's commandments, and what would not make him pleased. When he speaks to us and tells us something wrong, that's our responsibility not to do it. Or to when he tells us to do it. Sometimes it's blind. Sometimes we don't know what we're getting ourselves into. But these servants, they did it exactly how Jesus told them. They took these pots and they filled them to the brim, as much as they could. And these 20 to 30 gallons of water each is a lot. Like, I could totally see myself being lazy and be like they did do exactly what Jesus wanted them to do. Jesus, like, he didn't have to use his servants for his first miracle. He didn't have to. He didn't have to use anybody. He could have just blinked. There's reasons he uses us. There is. One, it's for a purpose, and he knows. He knew that these servants would be chosen. They were going to share in this blessing, as you will see. They're going to share because they followed the Lord's instructions and did it how he wanted. Did it how he ordered us to follow those instructions. They received the blessing. Also, these water pots, by the way, just to give you a little history, because I know I told you I wouldn't give you a lot, but this is really cool. These water pots are used for Jewish ceremonial purposes, right? What that means, and I don't read Leviticus because it sucks, but Leviticus is a bunch of rules that Moses was given to give to these people, right? So before meal, before after hands, with these pots specifically. And you had to go through this huge process, and they would go through a water pot a day in some of these situations. I can't even imagine a wedding. They go crazy. Jesus said, dump these things, fill them with water, and of course, as later we know, he's going to turn to wine. So you may know what wine represents in the Bible, what it symbolizes, right? sometimes.
Joy.
Freely it represents. It's this old covenant that God made with the Israelites. And he said, follow these things. Of course, it's impossible to follow them. He was trying to point them, to show them how fired on the Israelites. They never really followed with what Jesus was saying. But the point is, the whole point of John chapter 2 right now is saying, hey, get away with the old and get in with the new. Like he's saying, hey, you don't need these things anymore because I'm replacing what the law was there for with my grace. And I'm replacing it with this new relationship. And this new relationship is a new covenant that you and I have. That ability to come to Jesus, to speak to him, to listen to him, and to follow what he says. And that's what he did. And he filled it to the brim. He filled up all that law couldn't do and replaced it with his grace. There's no rituals we have to do anymore. There's no this amount of animals that we have to sacrifice and burn and only eat this and that. Like, that's not a thing anymore. Like, God replaced that. You know, when he's going to do a lot more. Like, Jesus was saying that, you know. And sometimes in our lives, like I said, we don't know what to get ourselves into. Like, sometimes it's so hard to just do it. But it's so rewarding afterwards. My friend Sean Keeling, I talk to him about it all the time. He was put in college ministry, and he did not want to. He also, when he was their age, though, was at the worst point of his life, and was also an alcoholic, and was also struggling a lot when he was their age, and knew how to redirect them. When I was some of you guys' ages, I was addicted to drugs, and I was addicted to alcohol. I'm not saying this is what I'm called to do some days. I'm just like, dude, I don't know. I don't want to do this. Like, I'm not like, I'm not like, I don't know. I'm making it by grace of God that I can't even pull anything from this crap. Like, I don't know, like, this stuff for a reason. And I'm trying to follow that. And I mean, it doesn't matter how old you are, where you're at, like, God is telling you something. And he is trying to, like, I don't know, we will take in that blessing. God wants us to be blessed. God wants us to live a life where there's nothing. He doesn't want us to have a bad life. Now, it doesn't mean he's not going to have a bad life. I'm not saying that at all. But as you see, though, we're receiving this blessing. Verses 9 through 12, called Watch and Praise. When the master of the ceremonies tasted the water that was now wine, not knowing where it had come from, though of course the servants knew, he called the bridegroom over. Usually a host serves the best wine first, he said. Then the wine is ooh. Then, when everyone is full and doesn't care, he brings out the less expensive wine. But you've kept the best until now. The new heading, and it's verse 11 through 12, it says, this miraculous sign at Cana in Galilee was Jesus' first display of his glory, and his disciples believed in him. After the wedding, he went to Capernaum for a few days with his mother and his brothers and his disciples. A couple things. One, what he's saying is at weddings in this time, they would give the best wine first, get them drunk, then give them bad wine afterwards so they couldn't tell. To save, I'm sure, whatever talents they had. I don't know what they had like that.
Solid. Solid.
Yes. Yes. It's actually brilliant, yeah. It says that the servants knew, and that they were the only, you know, it talks about how the disciples believed afterwards, but he used the servants and they knew. And I don't know. We listen, we speak, we listen, we follow. And we watch. And we kind of do it again. And we're not watching to see like, oh, what's going to come from this by living this life. It's like, what is God going to do in me by this? God made Jesus brought the disciples to believe. Before this, they decided some rabbi, some teacher, maybe a prophet. And through this, it changed their life. This was his first miracle. This is his first sign. They're called the 7 signs of John because there's to point to something. Jesus chose a wedding of all things to perform this first thing. It shows, I'm not going to get into logistics, but it proves like his approval on weddings, and I'm not getting into that, it's long. But a wedding is something that's universally known everywhere. It doesn't matter where you go. In that culture, in every culture, a wedding is understood. He used this to show, like, hey, he showed who he was. And it caused the disciples to believe, and it caused, I'm sure, these servants to believe, and I don't know. I didn't think I'd get this far. I thought I'd have a breakdown at this point. Oh, I know. Why put Watch and Praise? I kind of forgot. look at my notes. Check my notes real quick. Just gonna take a little lax. Yep, that doesn't help. Anyway, this is a relationship with Jesus. By following Him, He transforms us. By doing these things, and I'm not saying it's like a religious thing to do. I'm not saying this is like what you have to do. But I'm saying to have a relationship with Jesus, to know what to do in these situations in life that are hard. I mean, I don't know where you guys are at. I know where I'm at. I know where some of my older friends are. I know that this is like a really hard time in life. There's a lot of questions we have and we don't know what to do. Or we can find in the wrong things when we ask people, or we, instead of dealing with it, we seek comfort in something else. Instead of facing the problem, we're seeking help with what matters. And this is something that took me forever, and I'm still learning, and I still struggle, and I don't every single day talk to God. I don't bring stuff to Him. I don't listen by reading Scripture all the time. I don't always, it's rare that I do what He says to do. Like, I'm not lying, I'm not saying like I'm disobedient all the time, I'm like, God tells me to do a lot of things every day. He says, go talk to that scary guy. I'm like, no, I got this to do. He says, try to study this. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to study that. I don't know. I just want to share the guys with you. I wish I had an ending to it. I wish I would have remembered what I wrote when I said watch and praise. But I don't know. There's just something to keep in mind. Like, are you guys in your life? Are you listening? Do you know what His voice sounds like? Are you waiting for instructions? Do you know what what are you? I don't know. It helps me in my life. It's the only thing that helps me in my life. Anyway.
I think something to go along with the watching and praising is like, when you do what He says, you can expect results. Like, He's not going to call you, like, you might not get the results that you're necessarily looking for, but He does want us to watch and be open to seeing what He's doing. Because, I mean, when it comes to doing what He says, like, if you don't necessarily get something out of it for yourself, then it might not be as profitable as it could be. Like, we talk about at camp a lot how we love out of the overflow of our hearts, and that we're constantly being filled up and we're having stuff put into us. If you're doing what He says, but you're not there to receive the blessing, or you're not looking for what God is doing, then it's not going to be as beneficial or impactful as it could be.
And I mean, I don't want this to sound, that's good, that's true. And I don't want this to sound like we're doing this because we receive blessings.
Oh, no.
And I know you guys know that, but I don't want we don't follow because we're going to get something out of it.
But-
We are.
But one of the blessings that we do get from following and obeying, or just watching and listening, if you test Him, if He says obey and you obey, it actually helps you build trust with Him, because there's so many times where you feel like, oh, I was supposed to talk to this person, and then you didn't, and then you find out later that this person was going through something, and you're like, oh, that's what I was supposed to, but when you actually follow through and you do those things and you find out, I never would have approached this person, but then I did because I felt like God wanted me to, and this happened and we had this amazing conversation, or I never thought I could be friends with this person, but he's, somehow, God knit our hearts together. That's a reward, that's an intimacy that is built with the Lord that is so much bigger than money or worldly things, and that's going to make it easier to obey later on. So
The longer that because this is a relationship. I don't know what you guys heard, but describing these things, talking, listening, receiving things, like this is a relationship. This is not sit at the altar and exactly 3 o'clock today and do this and that. It's something that's real and it's alive, and it's someone that you talk to and you receive from. And I don't know what that sounds like to you, what that concept sounds to you, but that is exactly what it is. It's as clear as I talking to Cole or me talking to this person. It's a relationship. And the longer you know him, I mean, I don't know how to explain it. It's a feeling and it's joy. And joy doesn't go away based off circumstances. It's not based off your emotional state. I know every single day that when I wake up that I can join in the presence of somebody that loves me and he will make me feel amazing. I just have to talk and I just have to listen. And I know that it's not based on my feelings, but I know that this joy has given me eternal life, and I know that he's given me sobriety, and I know that he's given me a clear mind, and I know that he's helped me understand who I am, and that he's helped me to talk to people in a way that I didn't know I could. It's not, the longer you know him, it's not about what you can get, but what you can do, like to show the people, like, hey, you can have this too, and you can have this relationship. I think there's a lot of great stuff said. I think that next week might not be any better because it's finals week, but I think that this is a great note to end it on, and just some stuff you guys can think about. And I mean, I want to answer your questions if you have anything. If you have nothing, it's fine. But I think we're going to pray. We'll hang out for a little bit. We can do whatever. You guys will bow your heads with me. I'll cancel each other out.